This is your Wednesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. We got a lot to get to today. Wild home opener was Tuesday night. I'll get to that in just a little bit, and a little shame on myself. And the Timberwolves open Wednesday night at home as well, so a lot happening in sports. We'll have Sachin Gupta, Executive Vice President for the Timberwolves, who's taken over as their main decision maker in the wake of Gersson Rosas being fired a little less than a month ago. He'll be on the show here in just a little bit to kind of give his perspective on the roster that he inherited, that he helped construct, being under Rosas for a couple of years now, and kind of give his thoughts on trying to move forward in the wake of that situation. Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer for the Star Tribune, will also join me, talk a little bit about the preseason, talk a little bit about can this team get any better defensively this season. That has been a problem for them for a very long time. But first, what did I miss? Yeah, I talked about that Wild game, and what did I miss is a segment I do basically on pretty much on every show. Maybe not the Monday shows with Royce, but it's just kind of a way to catch up on everything that has been going on, kind of a catch-all way to do that. And usually it's directed at the listener, right? It's more like, hey, what did I, the listener, miss if I, went to bed early last night? I'm doing this podcast very early on, in the mornings of the weekdays, so I'm trying to catch you up on everything. Today, however, what did I miss is quite literal. Chris Lindy on Twitter actually said, "What did I miss should be self-reflective tomorrow." Yes, it should, because that came after I admitted on Twitter that I went to bed. I didn't go to bed, I guess. I turned the TV off, though, changed it to a different channel in the Wild game after the Jets scored what I thought was an empty net goal with a little over a minute left to put them ahead by 2. I was like, okay, that was the clean goal. 2-goal deficit at that point is going to be insurmountable. They're not going to win. Let's flip over to I think it was Golden State Lakers at that point. See what's going on in that basketball game. And instead, I'm helping put the kids to bed right after that. It's it's getting late. They don't have school today, so whatever. It's fine. And I'm scrolling through Instagram, and I see Instagram of all things. I see the Wild has posted something about the game. The post has a caption that says, "Are you not entertained?" And it has what looks like Joel Eriksson going in and scoring the game-winning goal in overtime to win 6-5. And I'm like, wait, what? What's going on? Is this like a highlight? Did I miss this? Sometimes Instagram cycles through stuff and it's old. Is this a highlight that was getting you ready for the Winnipeg game? Things like that. But it's like, no, they posted this 53 minutes ago. What's going on? And it turns out, yeah, you guys probably know by now that empty net goal was disallowed. Wild still trailed by 1 at that point instead of 2. Eck tied it in at the end of regulation and won it in overtime. So shame on me. Let that be a lesson to me. I heard a few of you said the same thing. You did the same thing. Unfortunately, I think Susie said same. Tony Myers said same boat. I thought all the posts I saw saying how great the Wild played were sarcastic. And another Kevin on Twitter said, I left the game when it was 5-3, so it could be worse. Yeah, the Wild did rally from 2 goals down. Looked like the deficit was going to be 2 again. Still won. Amazing, incredible resilience in that game. Not on my part, though, because I missed it. Shame on me. Never give up on a game until the very end, and let that be a lesson to all of us. And, don't give up on this Wild team. 3-0 right now. 2 of those wins have been quite dramatic. They might have something good going here right now in St. Paul.
I'm Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer at the Star Tribune and the first 5-time guest in daily delivery history. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast, our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, and even all of Rand's future blog posts about how the Timberwolves should trade for players they will never get, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Really happy to be joined on Daily Delivery today by Sachin Gupta, Executive Vice President of the Timberwolves, co-inventor of the trade machine. We'll get to that in a little bit. It's something that's followed him around from job to job, but I don't think it's something he's running away from either, because it's a pretty cool thing to put on your resume. Sachin, how are you today?
I'm doing well, doing well. Just really, really excited for the start of the year.
I think we all are. I want to ask. I got a bunch of things I want to ask you, but I want to talk about the roster right off the jump because that's most germane to what's going to happen in Wednesday's opener against the Rockets and beyond. The assembled roster. Maybe just kind of an open-ended question. What do you like about the players you have, and conversely, maybe what questions do you think remain unanswered about this group right now?
Well, for one, we do have some continuity from last year, but some of the additions that we've made this summer, Patrick Beverly, Taurean Prince, those guys provide a real veteran leadership that this group really needed. We've got a really young group, and there's a lot of talent, but there's a lot of room for growth. And I think Patrick and Taurean, that they've made a big impact in the short time that they've been here. And I think they're really going to help our young guys continue to grow and develop and bring a certain intensity. Patrick's been to the playoffs every single year of his career. And I think that's really meaningful. And he's really taken on that leadership role. And his goal is to lead us back to that promised land.
Stylistically, how do you think this team will play? Is it kind of more of what we saw towards the end of last year when Chris Finch took over and kind of was able to put some of his imprint on this, or will there be, with a little bit of a different personnel, do you think this will look a little different?
I think it'll be largely similar. Coach now has had a full off season and a full training camp, which he didn't have before. So I think all the principles that he believes in, I also believe in. We're very much on the same page of playing up tempo, playing with pace and space, and we believe in getting good shots at the rim, getting to the free throw line, taking open threes. So those philosophies haven't changed, and going forward, I think we will try to optimize around the talent and the skill set of the players that we have. Carl in particular is such a unique player and such a talent on the offensive end. It's the same with D'Lo and Ant, just very versatile players, which gives coach a lot of room to be creative. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does with that.
Gersson Rosas was fired a little less than a month ago. When that happened, myself, a lot of other people were like, what is this going to mean? What comes next for the organization when there's a jolt that close to the start of the season, when you are now, essentially in charge of a lot of what he did? How do you, aside from basketball, how do you make sure that this that it didn't or wouldn't descend into some sort of organizational chaos or kind of stop the perception of everything's going to fall apart?
Yeah, so I've been here for the past 2 years, and the first thing that I did was to reassure everyone that there's no other changes. Where we have the same goals that we had the week before, and we're all here, we're all in it together, and we're ready to go. And since day one at training camp, it's been all about basketball, and there's a real excitement and energy in the building. And we're just ready to go. We've had a great preseason, and we're ready to start tomorrow, and excited to play at Target Center in front of a bunch of fans, which we've been missing for the past 2 seasons. And we have 7 of our first 8 at home. So we're really, really excited to get off on the right foot and build some momentum.
How can you make your mark on this team, given that we don't know, this hasn't been like permanently settled, and, there's probably limited moves you can make roster wise. I can say it, maybe you can't, Ben Simmons being the obvious exception to that. How do you kind of make your mark on what you want to do with this leadership opportunity?
I honestly, I don't view it as that. I don't view it as me trying to make my mark and trying to prove that, this is my job. My goal is just to do the best job that I can, and to help coach and to help put everyone here in the best position possible to succeed. And I'm just going to do the best that I can. And when opportunities come up, we'll try to take advantage of them. But it's all about it's all about putting the team in the best position. It's not about me.
That said, decisions within an organization ideally are made collaboratively, and I think that's it's been the case at times. If you had been in charge of the roster the last 2 years, like the one with the final say, is there an example of one specific thing or one direction you might have gone differently than what Gersson ultimately did?
No, I wouldn't say that. We were grouped together, and we've got a lot of really good people here, and we go into a room and we debate, and we come out with a decision, and we're on the same page when we come out, and that's how we'll continue to operate.
You've been described as being maybe the last one to speak in a meeting. What's the benefit of that sort of listening approach as opposed to an alpha approach of dominating a discussion and being the one that's trying to set the agenda from the beginning?
It's very natural for me, and it comes from a place of just humility and knowing that I don't have all the answers, and if I did, then we wouldn't need all these scouts and assistant coaches and everything. And I know that everyone in this building provides real value, and they all have a unique perspective, and it's important to take in all those perspectives to get the clearest picture possible of whatever we're staring at to get to the best answer.
You said that comes naturally. Is that, from even before your professional career started? Is that an approach you picked up along the way? You've been a lot of different places, worked for a lot of different people.
Yeah, I mean, it's humility is just a value that's really important to me and always has been. But certainly throughout my career, I think I've continued to hone that into to understand, from my time in Houston to Philadelphia to Detroit to here, just the value of having good processes to take in as much information as possible to get to the best answer.
I've heard you a couple more things. Really appreciating this discussion with Sachin Gupta from the Timberwolves. I've heard you talk a little bit in the past about how relationships are important in the NBA in terms of when you're trying to put trades together. I think you were really important in the Robert Covington trade a couple of years ago. I mean, I think we probably realize some of that, but also, when we're putting together, we're hypothetically thinking about trades. Maybe, those who aren't within those walls, do we undervalue just how important those relationships are and being able to pick up a phone and have a casual conversation at the outset of a discussion like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's not to say that you're never going to come to a deal with another team where the relationship isn't as strong. As long as the goals align, hopefully you can get to a deal. But sometimes a really bad relationship can't stand in the way of a deal, and on the opposite end, a really good relationship, like you said, makes it easier to have informal conversations, and maybe just when you're talking informally as friends, that you might pop up with an idea, and just it makes it easier having a trust to be able to share information about your needs and what you're looking for, versus if there's not that trust and you're worried that what you say might get leaked to publicly or something to that effect.
A couple more things, like I said, one being probably the least formal way of putting together a trade is the NBA's trade machine. I go on there a lot, so thank you for that contribution. Do you still hop on the trade machine and give it a spin sometimes just to see if a deal will work?
Every now and then I check in on it. We do have our own internal tools that we use nowadays. I don't rely on the same thing that I had built all those years ago, but it was a lot of fun. And but way back then when I did that, it forced me to understand the rules of the CBA to be able to code in all that logic. And prior to that, I certainly didn't understand all the intricacies, and it certainly became useful for me early on in my first job in Houston, and has continued to be important for me.
I really want to picture you in your office, just hammering away on 3 and 4 team trades on the trade machine. Sachin, last thing, I think we all have maybe different definitions of what might make this a successful season for the Timberwolves. And I think it's an important one. If you just look at where this organization's trajectory is, where Karl Anthony Towns is in his career, What to you would make this a successful Timberwolves season?
We want to make the playoffs. That's important to us. But we need to be playing competitive games all the way through the year and in competing for a play-in spot. And we definitely need to take steps forward from where we've been and start building this thing forward. We do have a very young team, but that's no excuse. And we're ready to take steps forward and really compete for the playoffs.
Well, looking forward to seeing how that all plays out starting Wednesday against the Rockets at Target Center. Good luck. Good luck to you. Enjoy this conversation, and let's catch up again down the road, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Now, I mentioned Ben Simmons to Sachin Gupta, and we'll talk about that a little bit with Chris Hine here as well. That situation is a complete mess. I don't know if you saw the latest, but Ben Simmons basically sent home from practice Tuesday, suspended for the 76ers season opener because it doesn't seem like he's in it mentally. Joel Embiid, his teammate, keeps saying he doesn't have to babysit him. It's not great right now. Trade value can't be very high right now. And just keep an eye on this. Keep an eye on whether this gets revisited at a certain point with the Timberwolves during the season, because I don't think this story is anywhere near complete. Timberwolves season is upon us. First game of the year, Wednesday night against the Houston Rockets at Target Center. Chris Hine covers the Wolves for the Star Tribune and has for the last few seasons, and he's with me on Daily Delivery today. Chris, how are you doing?
Doing good, Mike. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm excited for another year of Wolves basketball. October is always strikes me as not a weird time to think basketball, because it always feels like this is when the NBA starts, but it's just the convergence of so many seasons. You got the Wild playing now, the Vikings are still playing. You still got the World Series about to happen. So, just it doesn't go front brain right away, but when they're about to start, there are a lot of things to think about. And with this team, I think they're pretty interesting, kind of like we've talked about on past shows. And as we think about the roster construction, the offseason additions of Patrick Beverley, Taurean Prince, and obviously the big shocker about a month ago of Gersson Rosas leaving. There's a lot of things that we kind of got to see play out on the court before we're probably going to have a real sense of this team. That said, going into the year, as you think about storylines, maybe even defense and trying to improve that, what do you see as kind of the things that we should be watching for in the first 5 to 10 games to kind of know kind of what the feel is of this team?
Yeah, I think for me, it really does all boil down to how good is this team going to be defensively. I think the offense is going to be fine. The offense in some ways, take care of itself when you have the talent like D'Angelo Russell, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards on that end of the floor. But can they be consistent enough on a night in, night out basis to become, as Chris Finch has said, just average defensively? Just get to the middle of the pack. Don't languish in the bottom 5 like they have for the last few years here. That to me is the biggest storyline of this season. Now, Finch has come in and is trying to revamp a little bit about how they play defense. He's going to be using Karl Anthony Towns more along the perimeter, playing quote unquote at the level on screens to contest those, not so much drop coverage, rim responsibility. And that's going to be handled by the weak side low man on defense. And we'll see how much Towns is able to affect, and do some damage up at the level this season, a little more often than we saw him in past years. So that's going to be a change you're going to see is him being more involved in defending pick and rolls than maybe in the past when he was just playing that drop coverage. Now, does that lead to improved defense? I don't know. I look at the roster and I see that they have. I think they have more talent and more guys who are more defensive minded than they have the last few years. You have Patrick Beverley, you have Josh Okogie, you have Jaden McDaniels, you have even Taurean Prince, who's not a bad defender and can defend multiple positions. So I look at the roster and I see more defensive talent. Can they string it together on a night in, night out basis is for me the question number one of whether this team is going to be a play-in team, low kind of high seed contender in the Western Conference, or languishing at the bottom again.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think, it's been a kind of maybe mystery is the wrong word, because you can see why it happened. But, for many years, even when, Tom Thibodeau was here, the defensive acumen that he seemingly brought to the table, they did languish near the bottom of the league, and they had their spurts. I think, the first handful of games with Robert Covington here, when you saw some of the things that he could affect from multiple positions, they would have stretches, but by and large, they would fall back down. Now, do you like you said, I think there's some defensive upgrades on the roster. Achieving balance seems like it will be a question for them, because they haven't in the past had a lot of guys who were good on offense and defense, or could affect games both ways. How much do you think that will inform starting lineups, rotations, things like that? Because I got to admit, some of those things are a little bit of a mystery to me still, and might still be a little bit of a mystery to Chris Finch at this point.
I think so. And I think that's fair to say. And a lot of what we've asked Finch ad nauseum about starting lineups and rotations this preseason. It seems to come up almost every day, because the fact of the matter is they're just, there really isn't a rotation or starting lineup at this point. And I think some of it's going to be matchup based and opponent based as well. And, Finch said the other day, it's like, guys could be starting, there's a difference between a starter and people who are starting, if that makes any kind of sense. So, they do feel like they have some starter caliber players. Doesn't mean everybody's going to be starting on a nightly basis. And plus, coaches will tell you that who closes the game is more important than who starts the game as well. And along those lines, you're going to see, I think, some mixing and matching as well, because you have some of the defensive prowess that you have on the roster that you maybe didn't have. You might be able to kind of sub offense for defense a little more, and with a few more guys than in years past. So we'll see how that plays out. The schedule lines up great for them here early in the season. Lots of home games, lots of games against teams that should be beatable, especially if you have designs on being a playoff / play-in team. So if, I think there's every reason for them to get off to a decent start here. And, if they don't get off to a decent start against Houston, against, New Orleans, who's going to be playing without Zion Williamson, and Orlando and teams like that are coming up on the schedule here early, I wonder how it's going to affect the rest of the season if you can't beat these teams early on.
What do you think is their best closing lineup, or even their best 5 players on the court at once? Because I think you're right. At the start of the game, you might sacrifice some offense. You might want to, have a certain identity, so you're going to mix and match. You make sure you have some defense out there. End of the game, though, you need a lot of different things, but you need to be able to score. You need guys. You can't have like dead ends on offense. Sometimes you can just play 5-on-4. As we think about this team, kind of initially, obviously,
and that's coming from the guy who wants Ben Simmons, right?
Ben Simmons is not a one-way player. Ben Simmons is a two-way player. Ben Simmons can't shoot, but Ben Simmons is far from a one-way player. Let's get that straight. And they were
playing 5-on-4 at the end of those playoff series, from what I remember.
That was like the worst of Ben Simmons. He was completely lost, and on the right roster, Chris Hine. I don't know.
Things seem to be going great right now in Philadelphia.
Yeah, things are going great. It's he's going to be there long term now.
Back on the right path.
Oh yeah. It's everything's going great over there. It's certainly not a matter of when, not if, for him to get traded. Maybe still here. I mean, I brought it up to Sachin Gupta earlier in this podcast, and obviously he has to dance around such things. But I don't. That case is not closed. Now, it does get interesting if the Wolves get off to a good start, and they start to think about, do we like what we have here and not want to disrupt that? But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. The bigger question is, Towns, Russell, Beasley, maybe Towns, Russell, and Edwards, though, for sure are your 3 best players. Those guys should be on the court in any closing situation as long as they're healthy, I would imagine. What do you think is what's the best 2 around them? Let's just say, like, situations aside, like, who would you want to see on the court with those 2?
That's tough. I guess I would go I'd probably say McDaniels and Beverly.
Yeah, those were going to be my two.
I feel like I would want Beverly on the floor late in the game, just to help manage things. A little bit of on-court leadership, the defensive component. I don't think he's he's a minus on offense in that situation, especially when you have three really good scorers on the floor at the same time. So I would go Beverly and McDaniels probably.
And that keeps Beasley off the court, which is interesting because he's, probably your, outside of Towns.
Yeah, no. I mean, but there's the offense defense thing I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like I would rather have Malik Beasley on offense if I could. And then, I'd sub him out and put maybe Beverly in on defense if you could do that.
And you might be able to do that for a couple of possessions, but you're not going to be able to do that for 4 minutes. You're going to have to kind of pick your lineup and go. And it's going to be interesting. It's just, it does kind of speak to options they have, but also deficiencies that they have as well. You have a big Q&A with Chris Finch. I believe that's in Wednesday's newspaper. You can find that at StarTribune.com as well. He touched a little bit on the defense, like we talked about, and being, just be league average. And I think he even talked about that at the State Fair podcast that we did, at the State Fair appearance where we had him on. But he also touched a little bit on kind of the, holding this all together. And that's something that, I talked to Sachin Gupta about. It's only been a month since Gersson Rosas was fired. Not even quite that long. Yeah. Some of that had to have fallen on Finch as the guy who had the most direct day-to-day contact with these players. What were his thoughts on that time?
Yeah, he gave I thought a thorough answer when I asked him about kind of just what it was like to just be managing the team in the immediate wake of Gersson Rosas being fired. And, I think on one hand, it kind of helped them. He said it helped them that they had training camp coming up, just a couple of days later. It's like, okay, well, we have, it's not like they had like weeks and months for it to kind of stew around the organization. It's like, no, we have practice on Tuesday, right? So we got to get going here. Nothing really changed in terms of like their plans or his plans for training camp, how he wanted to install things. So from that sort of point, all he said was he had to attend a couple of meetings that he wasn't expecting to attend. So it set him back just a little bit in terms of preparation. But once they hit the practice floor, things were fairly normal. Stuff like that. I think when it comes to like front office drama and things like that, there tends to be at least a little bit of separation there between like the front office and what actually affects the players, right? I think we've spoken about this before. The players, they work with their coaching staffs, they work with the training staffs more on a day-to-day basis than they are hanging around the front office. So that has more of an effect on them than anything else. But there was no change really in the coaching staff or anything like that. So from that point of view, things were fairly normal. And Finch just personally said, I'm looking at the quote here now. He's like, my whole career has been about rapid change, either from good or bad or unforeseen or uncontrolled circumstances. He said, the most important thing for me is whatever it takes to keep the team as settled as possible. The more trappings you put around everything you do, the more chance you have to unsettle yourself when those things aren't perfect. We just try to roll with the punches and keep things as minimalist as possible, end quote. So that kind of sums up, I think, his attitude towards it. It's like not ideal, but also not a crisis or a disaster situation, and nothing that he hasn't dealt with before.
Big year. That's a good. I like that answer, and I like that perspective. It's a big year for a lot of people in this organization. I think we've talked about, Towns and, Edwards. Can you make another step? Russell kind of maybe playing for that next contract too. All that has kind of created expectations around this team, and, a lot of different opinions. I even saw like, the modeling for, what this, the wins on this team. I think different projection models have them like 10 wins apart. Like one of them's like basically 500 and one of them's more like 30 wins. The Vegas line
sounds about
like,
right.
The Vegas line's right in the middle of that. So
I think it's about right. I mean, I feel like a lot of us, and a lot of people that watch the team or just observers of the NBA, we don't really know where this Timberwolves team is going, right? Like, I feel like there is a lot of room there. We don't know how good they're going to be defensive. We don't know how good Anthony Edwards is going to be in year 2 yet. Will D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns, kind of pick up where they left off last year, or will inconsistency creep in? I feel like there can be a lot of variance in where this team ends up this year, don't you?
I really do. And I think watching the preseason, people got excited, but I do also think watching the preseason, there were some things you could see where it was the optimism was legitimate. Like, I feel like, Edwards just looks like whatever happened in the offseason, he's even better than he was. He's bigger. He looks like he's just matured, and the guy is still barely only 20 years old, right? Like, he is young, but, looks like he is on the verge of maybe making this his team to a certain degree. And, Towns looks motivated, looks healthy. Russell seems motivated. I mean, motivation's a big part of this league. It's a big part of sports, and they seem like they are a properly motivated team. So I think I get why there is a certain amount of upside here. I've just seen so many seasons of upside get upended for various reasons. It's not always the same thing. Sometimes it's injuries. Sometimes it's just they weren't as good as you thought they were, and sometimes it's a star player goes and blows everything up. But it kind of depends. But I guess I'm closer to seeing the optimism than I was maybe a month ago.
I think that's fair. And we asked actually Karl-Anthony Towns earlier today about, like, this is the most, I think it was Jace Frederick from the Pioneer Press asked him, this is the most excited or optimistic you've been about a season since when? And Carl said, since the playoff year. So, I think that gives you, I think that's a fairly honest, candid answer that, maybe the last few years, there hasn't been as much optimism about what this team can accomplish. But this year, they seem to be at least feeling the good vibes right now.
Yeah, well, we'll see where those vibes take them. First, like you said, the schedule is pretty forgiving early on. So I don't know if, that I think we might learn a little bit more about them if they lost than if they won. But if they come out of this stretch, above 500, feeling pretty good about themselves, that could carry over to some better competition as well. But I'm excited just to see it on the court again, see what they've got. It feels like off seasons, off seasons are interminable. You just want to get some answers, right?
I think that's where we're at right now. It's been 2-3 weeks since training camp started, and I at least I personally have reached a point where it's like I just want to see some games already. I'm sick of asking guys like the preseason kind of questions, like, let's see some games and let's get into the rhythm of a season and let's get rolling here. I think it's going to be interesting to see also defensively, like, yes, they have to be better in the half court, right? But I think one thing also to keep in mind is that they're trying to get better kind of on the margins of how teams score points. And that's something that you can read about in the Finch Q&A today. And, he said, he kind of broke it down this way. He said, what are the three kind of most efficient ways teams score on you? Transition, getting easily to the basket, getting to the free throw line, and offensive rebounding, extending possessions, right? And so that has been a big emphasis for them too, is transition defense, not allowing teams to shoot at a high rate in transition. B, they're very concerned about the number of fouls that they had last year. So they're trying to play with fouling less. And we'll see how that goes this year. And I might explore that a little more in depth as the season goes along. And then 3, they're trying to get better rebounding wise. And I think that's going to be a big concern for them because they're not the biggest team. They have to figure out a way to not get absolutely killed on the glass the way they have the last few years.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a, I think you made a good point earlier. The points will kind of take care of themselves. How many strides the defense makes probably will tell the story of the season, though, and whether they are at least a play-in team or at the bottom. But at least we get some answers pretty soon, starting Wednesday night. Chris Hine, good stuff. We'll do this many, many times during the season. Get you up to 50 appearances instead of just 5.
Can't wait. Thanks, Mike.
Let's finish with the cooler. Bring on the robot umps. We call them robot umps. It's not going to be a robot sitting behind home plate, but electronically calling balls and strikes. Technology is there. The Red Sox, it cost them 7 runs in Tuesday's ALCS. Huge pivotal game. A missed ball strike call would have kept the game 2-2 in the 9th inning. Instead, the Astros get 7 runs that inning. and tie that series 2-2. So just another example of maybe where you could use technology instead of the human element. Home plate umpire missed a bunch of calls, including a critical one in that game. Thanks for joining me here today. That will do it. Good stuff coming up later this week. I believe Wild goalie Cam Talbot will be on Thursday's show. Friday we'll do some NFL picks and maybe talk some Gopher hockey as well. We'll see how that all shakes out. For the rest of Wednesday, enjoy yourselves. Download the podcast, write a review if you would. Haven't seen a review show up for a while, but I know a lot of you are listening. So if you're listening, maybe write a review on the Apple Store. That would help me out. Give it a rating, and we'll see you again on Thursday.